welcome to the deep dive. For decades now, modern society has just been totally obsessed with this one single concept, efficiency.
Yeah, definitely. It's the defining characteristic of our era, really. Faster, cheaper, optimized.
Right, exactly. We want everything frictionless. But today's source note suggests this relentless obsession is actually building this massive hidden crisis right under our feet.
It really is, because we are looking at theoretical frameworks that view the world through underlying structural pressures. The text calls them gradients.
And when you look at these gradients, the fundamental question we should be asking completely changes for all of us.
Yeah, we are hitting a major structural inflection point. Like, the guiding philosophy of the 20th century was basically just don't break.
Make it rigid, solid.
Exactly. Build the system or the supply chain so it's unbreakable. But the authors of these notes argue that the core danger is no longer the failure itself.
So it's what happens after.
Yeah. The issue is whether recovery remains possible after the failure.
Which poses a really unsettling question for you listening right now. What happens to our world when systems become so perfectly optimized that they completely lose the ability to bounce back?
To understand that, we have to look at the system we are currently living in. The notes call this the efficiency civilization.
Right, the era of optimization, synchronization. If we can shave off a fraction of a cent on a global transaction, we just do it.
And we celebrate it. I mean, success is measured almost purely by growth rates and uptime. Systems should never, ever stop.
Well, wait, I feel like people would defend that, right? Efficiency brought enormous benefits. It built the modern global supply chain.
Oh, absolutely. They wouldn't be wrong about that. I mean, the growth rates generated by the efficiency civilization are just staggering.
Right. We have so much more now.
We do. But the trade-off is hidden in the architecture itself. As these systems became far more productive, they simultaneously became entirely unforgiving.
Because we systematically stripped out all the padding.
Exactly. The authors use this striking phrase. They say, we optimized away our forgiveness.
Wow. Optimized away our forgiveness. That hits hard.
Yeah. When you systematically eliminate alternative paths and operational buffers, you are fundamentally trading resilience for speed.
It makes me think of, a high-performance Formula One race car. Have you watched those?
Oh, yeah. Absolute engineering marvels.
Right. They're unbelievably fast when conditions are perfect. Smooth track, warm tires, perfect butter.
Fine-tuned for speed alone. Every ounce of extra weight is just stripped out.
But if one tiny thing goes wrong, a single internal sensor misfires, or a tiny piece of debris hits a wing, the car doesn't just pull over, it literally disintegrates on the track.
Right, it shatters because there is zero internal margin for error built into the design.
And that's what is happening to our systems.
Yeah, that cascading failure is the core vulnerability here. We labeled that stripped out weight as waste, extra inventory sitting in a warehouse. That's inefficient.
So we switched to just-in-time delivery.
Which is brilliant for the bottom line until something disrupts it.
And then you realize the lack of waste means a single bottleneck seizes up everything. The whole global trade network just stops.
Exactly. The danger today isn't just a temporary pause. It is what the notes call irreversible failure.
Irreversible. Wow. So if our systems are so tightly wound that they can't restart once they stop, then the goal of just never failing is essentially a fairy tale.
Total prevention is mathematically impossible in a complex world.
So what replaces stability then?
Well, maybe nothing replaces it entirely, but stability alone is just no longer enough. A system needs the capacity to return to baseline.
The notes frame this as the shift toward a recovery civilization.
Yes. The objective moves from the illusion of perfection to the reality of resilience. We stop asking, will it break?
And we start asking, can it return?
Exactly. Not will it break, but can it return?
But how do you even measure that? With efficiency, I can measure uptime. I can measure profit margins. How do you quantify a system's ability to return?
The authors introduce this concept called reconconnectability. They argue that true trust shouldn't be based on the false comfort that a connection will never break.
Right, because it eventually will.
Instead, trust exists in the reconnection probability.
I love that quote from the text. Trust is not the absence of disconnection, but the certainty of reestablishing contact.
It's a really profound way to put it.
It makes me think of, driving through a long tunnel while you're on your cell phone.
Ah, okay. How so?
Well, when the call drops in a dead zone, you don't panic and throw your phone out the window. You don't assume the technology is permanently broken forever.
Right, you just wait it out.
Because you trust the network. Not because it never fails, but because you know the moment you exit the tunnel, it will reconnect. The reconnectability is high.
That is a perfect illustration. Reconnectability is that built-in capability to touch base again. But the authors warn that our current obsession with efficiency is actually destroying that capability.
Leading to what they call chronic depolarization.
Yes, chronic depolarization.
That sounds like a battery that just can't hold a charge anymore.
The analogy is deliberate. It comes from biology. When a nerve cell fires, it depolarizes. It literally loses its charge to send a signal.
Okay, makes sense.
But before it can fire again, it has to rest. It has to repolarize and gather energy.
It needs some margin.
Exactly. If you constantly stimulate that cell without giving it margin to recover, it enters chronic depolarization. It becomes functionally exhausted.
Man, that feels incredibly applicable to the modern workforce right now. I mean, we are seeing massive burnout everywhere.
Because that biological dynamic applies to human capital just as much as supply chains. People are fatigued, but the system doesn't allow them to stop.
You're running on fumes, but the treadmill is hardwired to never turn off.
And this chronic inability to reboot is far more dangerous than an acute collapse. A sudden collapse you can diagnose and fix.
But chronic depolarization is just like slowly grinding your gears into dust.
Because there is no capacity to pause.
So if this chronic depolarization is the main threat, how does a society actually build this return capacity? Like, what are the actual mechanics of a recovery civilization?
Well, the sources answer this by completely redefining a word we use constantly. Care.
Care. See, when I hear that, my brain goes straight to human kindness. You know, holding someone's hand when they're sick. Something deeply emotional.
Yeah, but the notes strip away the sentimentality. They define care in a strictly mechanical, structural way.
Wait, so literally as an infrastructure?
Yes. Education, medical systems, local communities, families. These aren't just moral goods or optional social programs.
What are they then?
They are the societal reboot devices.
Let's follow the mechanism on that. How does a local community act as a mechanical reboot device?
Think back to that worker experiencing chronic depolarization. When they finally shatter under the pressure of hyper-efficiency, they drop out of the productive system.
Right, they just can't keep going.
If there is no infrastructure to process that failure, no healthcare, no community support, no family structure, that human capital is permanently lost.
They're just the shattered debris of the Formula One car left on the track.
Exactly. But the care layer acts as the pit crew. It absorbs the energy of the failure, rehabilitates the broken component, and eventually returns them to a functioning state.
So without that care layer, there is no recovery, only irreversible failure.
That is why the text frames this on what they call the civilization gradient. It tracks how our priorities have evolved.
Moving from, what, unbreakable structures in the 20th century?
Right. Unbreakable structures, massive dams, monolithic corporations, building walls so thick they can't be knocked down.
And then we shifted to unstoppable structures, the global 24/7 synchronization of the efficiency civilization.
But the gradient indicates we are now being forced into a third paradigm, returnable structures.
So the competition is transitioning. We're moving from an efficiency competition to a recovery competition.
Yes. It is not about who can run the fastest for the longest anymore.
It's about who can take a massive hit, process the damage through their care infrastructure, and get back on their feet the quickest.
Which brings us to the crossroads. The notes lay out 3 scenarios, or branches, for how we might evolve from here.
Okay, branch A seems to be just the path of inertia, right? If we refuse to pivot and just keep obsessing over short-term optimization.
Yeah, branch A is the path of least resistance. We keep pushing for faster and cheaper, completely ignoring the lack of margin.
And the inevitable result of that is total loss of reconnectability, sliding right into chronic depolarization.
We become a society so exhausted that when the next major shock hits, we simply cannot process it. We lack the mechanical capability to bounce back.
That is incredibly fragile. So if branch A is running the engine until it explodes, I assume branch B is where we actually pump the brakes.
Branch B is the successful transition to the recovery civilization. We intentionally build redundancies back into our systems.
We put the waste back in.
Yes, but we recategorize it. An extra warehouse of inventory or a fully staffed hospital with empty beds.
That's not waste. That is a buffer.
Exactly. The outcome is highly fluid, adaptable stability. The system can take a hit, absorb it, and return to form.
That sounds ideal. But, I mean, human nature being what it is, I can't imagine we'll just easily choose the sensible path. What if society tries to have its cake and eat it too?
That attempt to compromise leads to branch C, the separation.
This concept is wild. And Incredibly dystopian.
It is. We end up with a two-tiered civilization. The upper tier remains entirely focused on hyper-efficiency, operating at light speed.
But to maintain that speed without shattering, it needs a buffer. It needs a way to handle the fallout of its own pace.
And the lower tier is forced to function as that buffer. It becomes a localized recovery community that absorbs the physical exhaustion generated by the upper tier.
Like a high-end smartphone, the CPU runs at max capacity, but it dumps all that intense thermal energy into a physical heat sink.
The lower tier takes the heat just to keep the processor running fast. The care layer is externalized to a subclass.
A literal structural separation of civilization. Wow, this really brings these abstract theories right down to ground level.
It changes how you look at everything.
Exactly. Think about your own life, your career. The evaluation axis is shifting. Value won't belong to the fastest anymore. Value will belong to the most returnable.
For a long time, civilizations competed through productivity. Today, they may increasingly compete through recovery.
What matters more, never breaking or being able to return?